Welcome to my channel, The Good Book Tales. In today's video, we dive into one of the most mysterious and breathtaking moments in human history. The parting of the Red Sea. But this isn't just a tale from ancient scrolls or dusty books. This is a story about fear, faith, freedom, and a choice that changed the fate of a nation. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast sea, the roaring waves stretching endlessly before you. Behind you, the dust clouds of approaching horses, chariots, and a furious king bent on revenge. You're caught in the middle, with no way forward, no way back. Only trust in the words of a man who claims God is on your side. Would you stay and fight? Would you fall to your knees? Or would you believe in the impossible? This isn't just the story of Moses, it's the story of people like you and me. Ordinary men, women, and children. Farmers, builders, wanderers who had spent their lives in slavery, now suddenly walking free into the unknown. But freedom is never simple, and as they left Egypt behind, they didn't know that the hardest part was yet to come. As the Israelites marched out of Egypt under Moses' leadership, they carried more than just their belongings. They carried fear, trauma, and uncertainty. The promise of the promised land seemed distant, vague. Pharaoh had finally let them go, but his heart burned with regret and fury. With every beat of the drum, the Egyptian army raced forward, determined to crush the very people they had just released. The desert was merciless. The heat scorched their skin, and the cries of hungry children echoed through the winds. Still, they walked, trusting Moses, trusting the God who had sent plagues to set them free. But nothing could prepare them for what lay ahead. A wall of water, the Red Sea stretching wide and unbroken. No boats, no bridges, just waves, and behind them, the enemy closing in fast. Moses stood at the edge, eyes fixed on the sea, staff trembling in his hand. Thousands waited in silence. Every second felt like eternity. Some whispered prayers, others screamed in panic. The sound of chariots grew louder, the smell of horses, the shimmer of spears. And just when it seemed there was no escape, Moses raised his staff high into the sky. What happened next would defy the laws of nature. It would be spoken of for generations, a moment that would test every ounce of faith and courage. But the sea had not moved. Not yet. Stay with me as we uncover what happened at the edge of the impossible. Why did the sea part? How did an entire nation cross? And what happened to the mighty army of Egypt? The answers are more surprising than you think. This is the parting of the Red Sea, not just as a miracle, but as a moment where history, humanity, and divine power collided. And this is just the beginning. Before the sea even stirred, before a single drop shifted, let's rewind the story, because to truly understand the weight of this moment, you need to feel where it all began. The Israelites weren't warriors. They didn't grow up with weapons in their hands or strategy in their minds. They were slaves, born into generations of hard labor under the scorching Egyptian sun. Brick by brick, city by city, they built Pharaoh's empire with bleeding hands and broken spirits. They cried out for freedom year after year, but it seemed like their prayers were lost in the silence of time. Then from the wilderness, a man returned. Moses, once a prince of Egypt, raised in the very palace that oppressed his people. He had vanished for years, thought to be dead or forgotten. But he came back, not with an army, but with a message. A strange, burning message from a God the people had almost forgotten. "Let my people go," Moses declared to Pharaoh. It was bold, dangerous, unthinkable. Yet, behind his voice, something stirred, a power Egypt couldn't ignore. What followed was chaos. 10 plagues. That shook the land to its core. Rivers turned to blood. Darkness swallowed the skies. Crops died. Livestock collapsed. People trembled. Each plague was a strike not just against Pharaoh's rule, but against the gods Egypt trusted for strength. The final blow was the one that shattered everything, the death of the firstborns. Only then, finally, Pharaoh broke. He let the people go, not with kindness, but with rage boiling just beneath the surface. And so they left. Hundreds of thousands of them, men, women, children, carrying what little they could, walking through the desert, following a cloud by day and fire by night. It wasn't a peaceful escape. It was desperate, chaotic, uncertain. Some looked ahead with hope. Others looked behind in fear. Pharaoh's anger didn't stay buried for long. As soon as he realized what he had done, releasing his entire labor force, his grip on power, he ordered his army to chase them down. The most skilled soldiers, the fastest horses, the fiercest chariots, not to bring them back, to make an example of them. And now here they were, standing at the edge of the Red Sea. Nowhere to run, no time to think. Moses had led them this far, but was this the end of the road? Behind them, Pharaoh's army. In front of them, the sea. And overhead, the silence of a sky that seemed to be waiting for something. Something impossible. All around, the crowd grew restless. Parents clutched their children. Elders leaned on each other, whispering doubts. Some shouted at Moses, their voices shaking with fear. "Why did you bring us here? To die in the desert? Weren't we better off as slaves in Egypt?" The words hit hard, not just at Moses, but at the very core of what they were all fighting for. Freedom wasn't looking like a dream anymore. It looked like a trap, a cruel setup. The Red Sea in front, the death march behind. Hope was slipping fast. Moses didn't respond right away. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. Uncertainty, pressure, a quiet plea only he and God could hear. He was the chosen leader, but even chosen ones have moments where they question everything. He had seen miracles, spoken with fire. But this was different. This was a test not just of belief, but of timing, of courage, of endurance. Meanwhile, in the distance, the chariots thundered closer. Dust swirled through the air. Some of the younger men clenched makeshift weapons, wooden sticks, dull blades, anything they had carried from Egypt. But they knew they wouldn't stand a chance against trained soldiers. The fear was real, and so was the temptation to run or surrender. Among the crowd, quiet stories rippled. A mother whispering to her child about the plagues, trying to calm her trembling hands. A young man wondering if he should turn back and beg for mercy. An old woman closing her eyes, praying not for safety, but for strength to face whatever came next. Each person carried their own storm inside, their own private war of doubt and belief. And still, the sea didn't move. Not a single wave had shifted. The air was thick with panic. The sound of hooves pounding the earth grew louder by the second. The Israelites could now see the shimmer of armor in the distance, the sharp glint of swords catching the sunlight. The cries of the children rose, mingling with the shouts of men who were torn between running into the sea or falling to their knees in surrender. The tension was unbearable. Every heartbeat felt like it could be the last. Moses stood still, gripping his staff like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. His eyes scanned the horizon, then looked upward, searching for a sign, a word, anything. Around him, people shouted, begged, cursed the journey that had led them here. This was no longer just about escaping Egypt. This was about survival. The dream of freedom now stood on the edge of being crushed under Pharaoh's army. Pharaoh himself stood high on his chariot, eyes locked on the panicked crowd. He could almost taste the victory. These people, once his slaves, were now like trapped animals, boxed in by the sea and their own fear. He gave the signal, and the army surged forward. Chariots cut through the desert with deadly speed, and the ground shook with the sound of thousands of hooves. Then something changed. A wind began to stir, not a gentle breeze, but something stronger, deeper. It swept across the sea with a strange force, cutting through the cries of the people like a warning. Sand rose in twisting patterns. The fire in the sky, God's presence, moved behind the Israelites, standing like a wall between them and the Egyptians. People turned to Moses, some with desperation, others with the last flicker of faith. He raised his staff slowly as the wind screamed louder. The moment had come, but the sea still held its breath. The wind howled louder now, whipping through the camp with a force that made even the strongest men stumble. Sand blew into faces, eyes squinting against the storm, but the sea still refused to move. Moses' staff remained raised, his arms beginning to shake under the weight of silence. All eyes were on him. Some were filled with hope, others with doubt. And just when it felt like something had to happen, anything, the sound of splitting wood rang out behind them. A cry went up. One of the carts carrying water had overturned, the barrels rolling toward the edge of the sea, crashing into the shallows. In the chaos, a young boy had gotten too close. His mother screamed as he stumbled forward, nearly pulled under by a strong, unexpected wave. Two men ran to grab him, barely yanking him back to dry ground. The sea, calm for so long, had suddenly started pushing back. But instead of pulling them in, it felt like it was warning them, or preparing. Then something even stranger happened. The cloud that had been guiding them, the very presence of God, shifted. It moved fully behind the camp, growing darker, taller, like a storm cloud swelling in place. But the Egyptians didn't stop. Pharaoh shouted again, pushing his army forward. They were almost close enough now for the Israelites to hear the horses snorting, the metal wheels grinding over the rocks. Suddenly, without warning, the ground beneath the front of the camp cracked. A loud, echoing rumble spread across the shore. People screamed, thinking it was an earthquake, grabbing whatever they could to hold steady. A woman fell to her knees, praying loudly. A father grabbed his son and backed away, staring in shock at the cracks forming in the sand, running toward the edge of the water like veins in stone. And then came the second twist. Some of the people in the back of the camp, too afraid to face the sea, began trying to flee back toward the approaching army. "Maybe Pharaoh will spare us," one shouted. "Maybe it's better to return than to die here." That one voice triggered dozens more. Panic surged again, this time splitting the camp in two, those who still believed and those ready to give up. Moses didn't turn around. His eyes were fixed on the waves. His voice was quiet. "Stand firm," he said. "Do not fear." But in that moment, nothing felt certain anymore. And then, in the very moment when hope seemed all but lost, the impossible happened. The wind that had been howling across the shore grew into a roaring force, screaming across the surface of the Red Sea. Waves began to twist and turn, not in chaos, but in purpose. A massive wall of water rose, not crashing down, but pulling back, slowly, powerfully, revealing a narrow path of dry ground stretching deep into the heart of the sea. Gasps filled the air. The people stood frozen, eyes wide in disbelief. The sea, this endless wall that had blocked their future, had just split apart. Water towered high on either side like mountains held back by invisible hands. The ground beneath was dry, dusty, firm, walkable. The miracle they had hoped for had finally come. But there was no time to celebrate. Moses didn't hesitate. He stepped forward first, staff still in hand, leading the way into the path between the waters. The Israelites followed, some running, some crying, others walking in silence, overwhelmed by what they were witnessing. Step by step, they moved through the heart of the Red Sea, surrounded by water that could crash at any second, but didn't. Behind them, Pharaoh saw the opening and laughed. He ordered his chariots to follow. He didn't believe it was a miracle. He believed it was a trap, that he could still win. His army poured in after the Israelites, racing through the same dry path, their wheels slicing the ground like knives. The thunder of war rolled through the sea corridor. As the last of the Israelites reached the far shore, Moses turned back. His face was calm now, his arms raised again. And just as Pharaoh's chariots reached the center, the walls of water shivered. Then, with a sound louder than anything they'd ever heard, the sea came crashing down. Water rushed back into place, swallowing chariots, soldiers, horses, and rage all at once. The sea was whole again, as if nothing had happened. Silence returned, but then came the twist. Among the wreckage floating in the distance, one figure pulled himself to shore, alive, gasping for air. It wasn't Pharaoh, it was one of his generals, and in his hand he clutched a broken piece of Moses' old staff, the one thought lost years ago in the palace. He looked up at the Israelites from the other side of the sea, and he smiled. The sea was calm again, its waves gently brushing against the shore like nothing had happened. The air was still, heavy with silence, broken only by the soft weeping of people who had just witnessed something no words could fully explain. They were free, not just from Egypt, but from the fear that had chained them for generations. The Red Sea stood behind them now, not as a barrier, but as proof that even the impossible could be overcome. Families embraced. Children who had cried out of fear now laughed, splashing in the shallow water. Old men sank to their knees, touching the ground with trembling hands, as if to make sure it was real. Moses stood apart for a moment, staring across the water, where the Egyptian army had vanished. His eyes scanned the far shore, where the general had disappeared among the rocks. He said nothing about it, not yet. The people began to settle, some making fires, others tending to the injured. The tension was still there, not gone, just quieter now. They had made it through the sea, but their journey wasn't over. The promised land still lay far ahead. The desert would not be kind, but for the first time they believed, truly believed, that they were not alone. The whispers about the Egyptian general didn't take long to spread. Some saw it as a warning, others as a sign that something unfinished still lingered. But most chose to look forward. They had crossed the Red Sea. They had survived Pharaoh. They had seen miracles with their own eyes, and even if danger waited ahead, they would walk together, with the memory of the parted sea behind them, and hope burning quietly inside. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and deep red, Moses turned back to the people. He didn't speak of power, revenge, or even fear. He simply said, "Remember this day, not just for what God did, but for what you chose to believe." And so the story of the Red Sea came to an end. But for the people who lived it, it was only the beginning of freedom, of faith, and of a journey that would shape the history of the world. The sea had parted, but their path had only just begun.